Hello, hello, hello. I want to tell you about the moment that I realized that most leadership advice being sold to entrepreneurs right now is actually just dominance advice with better branding. Have you ever heard this? Command the room. Have you ever heard this? Be the alpha in every single negotiation. Never let them see you sweat. It's everywhere. And if you are a faith driven entrepreneur, it probably feels a little off to you, like a suit that almost fits, but it pulls at the shoulders. That's because it wasn't tailored for you. So today, we are starting a 3-part series on a completely different model of leadership, one that's actually older than every leadership book on the shelf, and it is called Servant Leadership. Part 1 is about setting the vision, okay? So let's jump right into it. Okay, before we get into it though, if you are new here, welcome to Building Foundations. We exist for faith-driven entrepreneurs who are tired of choosing between building something excellent and building something that honors God, because you were never supposed to have to choose between that. This channel is where we integrate business strategy with biblical wisdom. No separation, no compartmentalization of your Sunday self from your Monday self. For those of you who have been building with us for a while, I want to thank you for trusting us in your process. And if it's your first time here, I am glad you are here. Grab something to write with, because part 1 of this series is going to challenge some assumptions that you didn't even know that you were carrying. Those assumptions might be about leadership and what it was supposed to look like. Okay, so let's start with the problem with the leadership model that we have inherited from the world. So let's name it first, okay? Most of us learn leadership from one of 3 places: corporate structures that were designed for the industrial age, sports culture that treats every room like a competition to be won, or raw survival instincts. Whoever gets there first controls the room. Now, none of those 3 are wrong exactly, but none of them were built with a kingdom foundation, and it definitely shows. Now, here's what the model produces: leaders who are exhausted because they think leading means having every answer. Leaders who are lonely because they think vulnerability is weakness. Leaders who build teams that perform out of fear instead of teams that build out of conviction. And here's one thing that nobody tells you: teams that perform out of fear will hit a ceiling. But fear can produce compliance, but it cannot produce ownership. And if you want a business that scales beyond your own 2 hands, then you need people to own the vision, not people who are executing your orders because they are scared not to, because you're paying their paycheck. Now let's talk about what servant leadership actually means. So let's define our terms, because servant leadership gets thrown around very loosely, and that is not what we want to deal with. We have to start from a strong foundation. So let's define it. It does not mean to be a doormat, to be a servant leader. It doesn't mean that, if you're a servant leader, then you have no authority because you're serving people. It doesn't mean that you don't have a backbone. It doesn't mean that you don't have direction. It does not mean that you ask everyone's permission before you make a decision. The clearest picture that we have of servant leadership comes from Jesus in John chapter 13 at the Last Supper, where he takes off his outer garment, wraps a towel around his waist, and washes the feet of his disciples, a job reserved for the lowest servant in the household. And he says something that should completely reframe how you think about leadership. I have given you an example that you should do just as I have done to you. Now, notice what did not happen in this story. Jesus did not he didn't abandon his authority. He was still the one teaching, still the one that they had to follow, still the one with the plan for where they were going. He picked up a towel while holding full authority. You see, that's the tension that we have to hold as leaders. For clarity of vision, for ownership of direction, and a posture of service towards the people that you are leading. The two things are not opposites. They were never supposed to be separated. Benny Hinn has taught that true authority in the kingdom is never separated from humility. The moment you try to have one without the other, you've built something that is not sustainable. Now let's talk about why vision has to come first. Why does vision have to come first? So here's why we're starting this series with vision instead of systems or tactics, even though systems and tactics matter. We'll get there in our next episode, so make sure you stay with us and you don't miss that one, because that one's going to be really good. It's because servant leadership without a clear vision just becomes servitude. And servitude is not the same thing as service. Let that sit on you. Now, if you don't know where you're going serving your team will just be following you nowhere. The blind will be leading the blind, and they'll start to feel that. You become a leader who is available and directionless, present but purposeless, and people can feel that when you don't have a vision. They might not be able to name what they're feeling, but they can feel when a leader is serving them out of genuine conviction about where it is that they are headed, versus serving them because they don't know what else to do with their authority. You have to have a vision coupled with servant leadership is powerful. Vision is what gives your service teeth. It's the difference between a servant leader saying, I'm here to help you grow because you are building something specific together, versus just a nice boss with no direction. Kindness without vision is pleasant. Vision anchored in service is powerful. Now, let me give you the 3 layers of a God-given vision. Now, notice I said God-given vision, and we'll have to have another teaching about living in your purpose. Because maybe you're trying to live in a purpose that you weren't created from or for. And I'm just going to touch on this because I feel this strongly right now. I think about the Little Mermaid, and I'm saying this with a straight face. I think about the Little Mermaid, and there's something that stuck out when I was a kid and I used to watch the Little Mermaid. She found a fork. She didn't know what the fork was for. The fork is at the bottom of the ocean. So she begins to brush her hair with it, and she calls it a thingamabob. And guess what? It was a nice little hair comb. But that's not what it was intended for. And that fork will never live in its full purpose and never be used to its full capacity as a comb. And a lot of times we don't go to the one who created us to find out, why did he create you so that you can live in your God-given purpose? Because when you are living in your God-given purpose, you can be the fullness of what God created you to be. But when you start trying to create ideas based off of your low level of knowledge, and when I say low level, I'm not trying to offend you, but you are so much lower than the God who created you, because his mind is so much greater. The Bible says, just as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are his thoughts higher than your thoughts. He wrote the end from the beginning. He knows what's going to happen every moment, every day, every thought, everything that could ever happen to you. And that God has a plan for you. He said, I know the plans for you. Plans not to harm you, but to give you hope in the future. That God has a purpose for you. So we're talking about that purpose. And if you don't know that purpose, you need to ask God to reveal it to you and look for that teaching, because it's going to be powerful. But let's talk about the 3 layers of a God-given vision. I want to break down vision into 3 layers, because I think that a lot of entrepreneurs stop at layer number 1, and they wonder why their team isn't as interested in their vision. They haven't bought into it as much as they had hoped. So let's go right into this. I hope you have your pen and paper out, okay? For you entrepreneurs, let's do it. Layer number 1, the what. This is the surface layer. As I said, many people get stuck here. This is the product, the service, the offer, and it's necessary, but it is the least sticky layer. If your vision only lives here, your team is wondering, what more is this? Where's this going? Your team is working for a company, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it will not carry them through the hard seasons. Layer number 2, the why. This is where most modern businesses teach and it stops because they're not interested in expanding to their employees. It's good. It's a good stopping point. But if you go further, your people will buy in. Simon Sinek made a whole career pointing this out. Why does this business exist? What problem is it actually solving? And what does the problem do? And why does it matter? Why does the problem matter? This layer creates buy-in, and people will work harder for a why than for a what. I'll say that again. People will work harder for a why than for a what. Layer number 3, the who. This is the layer I think gets skipped the most. And it is the one that actually has staying power in a faith integrated business. Who is this vision for the sake of? Not just customers as a demographic, actual people, actual transformation, actual lives that get touched because this thing exists. When your team can see the actual human being on the other end of what they are building, something shifts. They're not just executing tasks anymore. They are participating in something that matters at the level of eternity and not just quarterly income. You want your people to go home to that family barbecue and tell their family that they are changing lives one task at a time. They have to drink the Kool-Aid. They have to buy into the vision. And part of that is them knowing, who are we touching? A servant leader's job in setting vision is to make sure that your team has access to all 3 layers, not just the first one. Most businesses only communicate the what. Some get to the why, but very few consistently connect their people to the who. Now let's talk about vision or casting vision in a repeated action, not a one-time event. I'm going to say that again. Casting vision is not a one-time event. It is a repeated action that you should build into your system as a business owner, as a visionary. So here's something that I wish somebody had told me earlier. Oh boy, do I wish I had a me. You don't cast vision once and check the box because vision leaks. It's not because your team is disloyal or forgetful. It's because daily tasks are loud and vision is quiet. And quiet things get drowned out if they don't intentionally amplify them. If you choose not to amplify them intentionally, they will be drowned out. A servant leader's job is to keep bringing the room back to why it matters over and over and over again in ways that don't feel like a broken record or feel like a reminder of something worth remembering. Now, think about how often scripture repeats the exaltation to remember. Remember the Lord, your God. Remember his covenants. Remember him. Do this in remembrance of him as often as you can. Remembering isn't a sign of forgetfulness on God's part. It's an acknowledgement that we are forgetful people who need to be brought back to what's true again and again and again. The same principle applies to your team. Casting vision isn't a kickoff meeting. It is a rhythm. T.D. Jakes said, "The vision without repetition dies in the noise of daily operation." That leaders who assume that their team remembers the why without being reminded of it are setting themselves up for a slow erosion of buy-in. Wow. Powerful. So let's talk about what this looks like practically, right? Because we have to talk about the practicality behind it. Let me get practical for a second because I don't want you to just be inspiring. I want this to be usable in your business, usable in your life, so that you can serve your people the right way. So if you have a team, even a team of 1 or 2 people right now, here's what vision casting as a servant leader can look like this week. Start every team meeting, even a quick one, with a 30-second reminder of the who. Who does this work serve? And what does it actually mean for their life when you do it well? It sounds small, but it compounds because you're building something in your team. Number 2, when you are giving feedback or correction, frame it in terms of the vision, not just the task. Instead of this report has errors, try this report matters because it's what lets us make good decisions for the people that we serve. Let's tighten it up. Same correction, completely different framing, and framing shapes culture over time. Number 3, this one takes humility, okay? So prepare yourself. Ask your team what they think the vision is. You might be surprised at the gap between what you think you've communicated and what has actually landed. The gap is not like indicative of your team and how good they are. It's information for you as a leader, because servant leadership means you're curious about what the gaps are instead of being defensive about them. Because if you don't know, you can't fix it. And it's more important for you to be humble to understand that an error in your business is usually starts with a leadership error. So we have to take responsibility over our ability to communicate, our ability to structure teams, our ability to create processes for our team so that they can be successful. That's a whole nother teaching, but I just wanted to throw that in there. So let's talk about setting the table for our next episode. Okay, that was part 1. Next time in this series, we are going to talk about the system behind servant leadership, because a beautiful vision with no operational structure underneath it will collapse the first time that you try to scale past yourself. Vision tells you where you are going. Systems will tell you how you're actually going to get there without burning out your whole team and bringing everybody down in the room, including you. But you cannot build good systems on top of a vision that nobody can articulate. So before you go there, I want you to actually do the work from this episode. Okay, so I'm going to give you some application steps, and I want you to take this to heart and do it. Because if you do it, I promise you, you will see the results. And I want to hear your testimonials. Reach out to us. Our email is in the bio or comment below, and we'll get a hold of you because we want to hear about how you were blessed by this. But here's the assignment, okay? Before we meet again, before you watch our next video, I think our next one will be on maybe Wednesday or so. But turn on those notifications, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss when we drop content, because these are really good episodes and I don't want you to miss out. But anyways, before we meet again, I want you to write out your vision in all 3 layers. Remember the 3 layers we went over? The what, the why, and the who. In plain language, no corporate jargon. And then I want you to ask yourself honestly, does my team actually know layer number 3? Not layer number 1, because most teams know layer number 1. And if they don't know layer number 1, I'm not going to say anything, but go do what you need to do. Layer number 3, though, most teams don't know that. And if the honest answer is no, that's not failure on your part. That's just clarity on where you need to start. And if you are building this alone right now, still do this exercise, because you need this clarity for yourself before you start to hand it over to anyone else and start building a team. You cannot lead people somewhere that you haven't already clearly named for yourself first. So you're starting from an excellent foundation. And a closing thought, servant leadership isn't a soft version of leadership for people who are afraid to lead with authority. It's actually a harder path, because it requires you to hold vision and humility in the same hand without letting either one slip. Jesus modeled it with a towel and full authority at the same time. That is the target. Not less leadership, better leadership. Leadership that serves the people it leads because it's anchored in something bigger than either the leader's ego or the team's comfort. So set the vision clearly, cast it repeatedly, and build it from a posture of service, not control. Now that's part one. I'll see you on part two, where we will build the systems that actually hold the vision up. And remember, we say Godspeed because God is the driving force of everything that we do. So Godspeed, may God be with you. And I'll see you on the next one. Bye.